Welcome to the Aboriginal channel. This episode will be another part to Aboriginal forts and castles. So right here we're going to look at the Rosalie Fort and Mansion, courtesy of the historic Natchez Foundation. But let's go over to Wikipedia and see what it says about Fort Rosalie. So it says Fort Rosalie was built by the French in 1716 within the territory of the Natchez Native Americans, and it was part of the French colonial empire in the present-day city of Natchez, Mississippi. Then it says, as part of the peace terms that ended the Natchez War of 1716, Jean Baptiste Lemoyne required the Natchez to build the fort by providing materials and labor. So the Natchez built the fort. Up here it says the fort was built by the French, but down here it says John Baptiste, after the peace terms that ended the Natchez War, required the Natchez to build the fort. Sited close to the main Natchez settlement called the Grand Village of the Natchez, Fort Rosalie served as the primary French stronghold and trading post among the Natchez. Pause. This is a lie. The French were living in tents like the Europeans always had. They brought their own tents. This fort right here, it says was built by the Natchez, but it has that five-sided shape that we've been seeing throughout these forts. And this was in the very, very early 1700s. It goes on to say that French settlements and tobacco plantations were established in Natchez territory, with the fort serving as the local seat of colonial government. Pause. Now, in a book I read called The Antiquities of Tennessee, it was stated by a traveler in the 1700s that the Natchez were one of the most powerful nations in the whole North America. So once again, they didn't allow the French to come set up a colonial government among them. So it says growing tensions between the French and the Natchez erupted into violence several times during the 1720s, culminating in a massive Natchez attack on November 29, 1729. They destroyed their entire French settlement, killing nearly all of the men and taking hundreds of women and children captive. The Natchez seized and occupied Fort Rosalie. So, as in previous videos, we've seen that somehow the only way that Indians end up with the forts is by way of taking it over or going through a battle for it. That's how it shows. It'll do that in Civil War. It'll say the Confederates took over the fort and then it was taken back by the Union forces, and then the Confederates would take it back after that, and so on and so forth. But it always gives an excuse on how Indians or the Confederate soldiers got their hands on the fort, which somehow it always says that was built by a Union officer. Not necessarily always, but the one down in Texas, they said was built by a Union officer, and I believe the one over in Florida as well. But we're going to focus on the shape of this Rosalie right here with its five sides and then the dugout area around it. Says this was 1760s Fort Rosalie. An identical fort can be found in Bermuda right here where it says Fort Cunningham, Bermuda. Fort Cunningham is located at Puget Island on Bermuda's St. George's Harbor. When the first governor, Richard Moore, came to Bermuda in 1612, he thought that Puget Island is one of the most strategic locations in Bermuda. This is how it looks right here. So it has the five sides, just like the one in Mississippi, and it's also dug out, just like Fort Rosalie in Mississippi, just like this. This is a classic Indian style fort right here. Here's another fort in Florida called Fort Zachary Taylor Historic State Park. And as I zoom in from the aerial view of it, we can see that it looks sort of like the one we seen in a previous video in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana. And also the one in Texas where the earth was dug out around it in a U shape. And that's what we're looking at right here, the water that's dug out around this old fort right here in Florida. If you look a little closely, you can see those diamond shapes at the corners of this fort right here. In a previous video, we seen on a sketching of a Tuscarora built fort in North Carolina in the early 1700s that had the exact diamond shapes at the ends of the walls. Now I want to go right here and just shows where it's lying at. So it says retaliation by the French and Allied Choctaw forces in 1730 forced the Natchez to evacuate, leaving the fort in ruins. By 1731, the French, with their more numerous Indian allies, had killed, captured, or dispersed most of the Natchez, and they ceased to exist as a tribe. Pause. That is not true. That's just a flat out lie. It says the French sold surviving Natchez into slavery. Many disdain for French plantations in the Caribbean. It says some escaped and found refuge among the Chickasaw Creek and Cherokee of the region, which is another lie. This is all lying because of what happened at the Devil's Punch Bowl in the 1860s. But if we go over here and look at some information about Jackson University, the HBCU that opened directly after the Civil War, it says the school was founded in 1877 by the American Baptist Home Mission Society as Natchez Seminary for the moral, religious, and intellectual improvement of Christian leaders of the colored people of Mississippi and the neighboring states. The institution was originally located in Natchez, Mississippi, but was moved to Jackson in 1882. Now, notice that it didn't say the intellectual improvement of Christian leaders of the African people. It said of the colored people, which let you know they were all Indians. And since it was in the town of Natchez, they were Natchez Indians.
All glory go to the Creator. It's an honor to be here today. I love the theme, American healing. Well, first let's think about something. Where did America come from? Has it always been America? Or was it just created to be America? Who are the real Americans? America keep changing and changing and changing. Let's go back in time when the American Indians looked like I look and roamed the southeast part of the United States freely. We have to tell the truth. We cannot heal America till we fix the foundation.